buildings with the EASSI projects. So just briefly, as way of introduction, I'm with Purdue MEP. We work as part of a nationwide system. So we work within the state of Indiana here to provide services to primarily manufacturers, but obviously we work with others as well. My name's Kelly Weger, not butchered at all. You did a great job, Alex. And as mentioned, my background, I practiced sustainable focused architecture in the state of Michigan before joining wholeheartedly into sustainability consulting and training. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since. I've been with Purdue MEP and moved down here to Indiana about 9 years ago.
Okay. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. And as a reminder, please make sure to mute your microphone so that we're not disrupting the others on the call. So this is the agenda. We're going to pack a lot in today. So please make sure, and if you have questions as I go through, you're welcome to throw those into the chat or write them down and ask those at the end. So first, I always like to start with defining sustainability. This is something that, sometimes this word is sort of thrown around a lot and people don't really know what it means. So with Purdue MEP, we always talk about what sustainability is, and there's a variety of definitions. So in the realm of sustainability professionals, we often refer to this one, which is how do we do what we need to do today without compromising, future generations' ability to do what they need to do. So that's been a very well accepted definition of sustainability. If you just look it up in the dictionary, it's how do I last for a long time, which is a great goal for, you in your career or you in your company. How do we make sure that we can continue to be here for a long time? And then this last definition is a bit older. This comes from the Constitution of the Iroquois Nations, which is that in every decision that we're making, we should be thinking about what that impact is going to be 7 generations down the line, which is a much bigger responsibility. So the goal here is, kind of somewhere between these, you find a meaning that works for you in terms of how you define sustainability. One of the core concepts is what we refer to as the triple bottom line. So everybody knows in business about the bottom line, right? You have to be able to, cover your costs. So profit is an important part of that. And then the other 2 parts are the planet and the people. And there's often a misconception that sustainability is just, how do we hug some trees and flush our money down the toilet? And the reality is that for any business to be sustainable, we have to find a balance of all 3 of these, the people, the planet, and the profit. And so in that center is where we find a business that's able to be successful and be sustainable and be around for a long time. If you ignore any one of these 3 pillars, then you're going to run into a lot of issues, right? So if you're a environmentally focused company, but you're unable to cover your costs, you're not sustainable. So it has to be that blend of all 3. One of the reasons why we're hearing a lot more conversation about sustainability is that we have, a lot of issues currently with labor. And the reality is that labor is the biggest cost for most companies. And those that start focusing on sustainability goals have a lot of benefits related to that labor issue. So employees really appreciate and more so want to work for a company that has some alignment with their values, that is, doing proactive good things to be better for the environment. And so that helps with attraction, retention, reducing that turnover. There are a lot more benefits, but we are going to jump right into why sustainability. So why is this something that we're talking about? Why do people care about this? The important thing to understand is what the concept is of carbon footprint and where carbon comes from. So in the process of purchasing anything, in the process of manufacturing anything, we have choices. And if we broaden our mind a little bit, we can start to understand where there is an environmental or carbon footprint for every single choice that we make. Every single thing that we touch came from some sort of raw material that was then extracted, processed, manufactured into something, assembled, transported again, and then utilized in some way. And then at the end of its product life cycle, it may end up being just landfilled. And so we want to think about all of the steps that go along here. So in each one of these activities, we are emitting carbon. So when we're driving a car, we're all familiar with that one. That's obvious. When we're flying, when we're using electricity, we're producing carbon emissions. And all of that contributes to climate change. And that's one of the main drivers that we're trying to combat right now. So anything that's involved in that. Where we're going is to understand this concept of circular economy. So for products, and this concept has been around for a while already, but a lot of us are just starting to hear it for the first time. But there are companies out there that have been focused on this cradle to cradle product life cycle, and they've been doing it for 20 years and working on constantly improving it. And that concept is at the end of the life cycle of the product, how can it be designed on the front end so that it then is able to be broken back down and either turned into organic material and composted, or able to be upcycled into a new product. It's not an easy task, but a lot of companies are doing this. And so there's a lot of more choices out there when we're making our purchasing decisions to find something that does have this circular economy option. And one more reason that we're talking about sustainability is just that, honestly, there's a lot of hidden risks and costs associated with things that we utilize that we don't think about. And so when we start having the full range of information, we can make better decisions. So, when we're talking with companies and, for example, looking at how can they reduce their water use, well, we know it's not just what you pay for that water. There's the purchase cost, there's disposal costs, but in addition to that, you're paying to pump it around, you're paying to heat it, you're paying to cool it. You've got labor costs associated with, cleaning, repairs, maintenance. You may have chemical costs with testing or treatment of water, or, modification for compliance. And you may also have risk costs associated with it. If you have issues, if you're contaminating water and there's an issue, then you've got brand issues, PR issues. You may have loss of production if you're a manufacturer, or even loss of business. So all of these embodied or hidden costs are helping us to understand that something that may look like it's, financially, it's not really worth it to invest in, going with the low flow fixture. Well, we're not looking at the full range of information. So once we see a different lens, we can have better decision making. So all that being said, we're now going to talk about greening your building. So as we get into that, we've got some different project examples that have been included in the documentation you may have already seen. And we're just going to kind of walk through some of these and talk about, what they are, what the benefits are. Some of them you may be familiar with, and give you an opportunity to ask questions. I will say this is not going to be inclusive of every possible variation that's out there for these different things. But again, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. Alex is more than welcome to jump in when he sees those questions and interrupt me so we can talk about them, or we can save them and talk about them at the end. So the first one is solar PV. Anybody know what PV stands for? Everybody's real quiet or doesn't know where that unmute button is.
Photovoltaic.
That's right. So photovoltaic. So what that means is that these panels are able to collect the energy from the sun and turn that into electricity, which we can then use to power things inside our buildings. Solar's been around for a very, very long time. The technology continues to increase in efficiency, and it's becoming much more cost effective. I actually used to run a solar program in 2009 to 2011-ish. And, back then we had a lot of subsidies that were needed in order to make it cost effective enough for folks to participate. Now we still have, some of those, including this program, helping to pay for it. But, really the cost effectiveness and the payback has come down significantly. So when you're investing in something like this, you're going to have this for 20, 30 years. And if it's a, 7 to 10 year payback, it's a great option, because after that point, all of that is free. So there are different types of ways you can include solar on your property. You can have roof-mounted solar. You can look at roof ballasted solar, which just means that it's sitting, it's not bolted down, and it has some sort of heavy material that is holding it so that if the winds pick up, they don't fly away. You can also do ground-mounted solar, and you could do canopy-mounted solar or awning-mounted solar. So, and there are some fun options with that. You've probably seen in some cases where there may be like a carport or a parking area that has shade provided with solar panels, which is a fun way to utilize them. You can also have some other choices. So you can have your solar be grid connected, meaning when you don't have enough energy, you're still able to pull energy from the utility provider. And if you have excess energy, you can send that back to them at whatever rate you can get if you're lucky enough to get a good one. Or you can have it be off-grid. You could be completely disconnected from the utility and have a battery backup system where you are 100% self-reliant. Most people, I would say, tend to go with the grid connected for a variety of reasons. And also, if you're doing that, you don't have to have enough solar to cover 100% of your solar energy needs. You could just be covering like 20%. So a little more flexibility there. And then you can have the solar intended to tie into powering your building, or you could also have a standalone system that maybe has a separate connection, and that is just specifically powering some sort of external device like parking lot lights or pedestrian lighting area. So there's, again, options with how you want to include solar. So benefits of solar, obviously you are cutting your electric costs. You're able to reduce your reliance on the utility. And most importantly, you're able to reduce your carbon emissions. So as more and more of us are working towards carbon neutrality goals, we absolutely are dependent on having more and more companies and utilities working on solar. And at some point, the utilities only have so much space, right, that they can be installing these. So they're continuing to grow and do utility scale solar. But eventually we need to be considering that on the individual buildings as well. All right, next one is going to be looking at HVAC. So you might have a building that has some older equipment in there. HVAC just stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. There are lots and lots of different types of HVAC setups, way too many to get into. We actually have a course and they talk through at least a dozen permutations of HVAC systems. So with an older system, they tend to have outdated technology. They tend to be energy hogs and they can be expensive to operate. So when we're looking at newer technology, there are, again, still a variety of options to consider. The most common, I would say, in a lot of applications, smaller buildings and small commercial and residential, the default might be, let's look at taking our existing furnace, which is a forced air unit, and just replacing it with a newer one that's condensing and high efficiency, which is great. There are other options that are even more efficient. So if you're really interested in cutting down your energy consumption and your carbon footprint, we can look at some different types of heat pumps. So heat pumps, there are a variety. So you've got a picture up here that's an example of a geothermal heat pump. I'm sure that some of you have heard of these, if not experienced them somewhere. Geothermal also has multiple options. In an urban setting where there's not a lot of land, the most common we would see is a vertical loop. And that would be the loops are going down into the ground. And essentially what you're doing is, if you've ever been in a cave, you've learned that the temperature a certain amount below grade is constant. And so utilizing that, we can share and use that either to cool in the summertime or to heat in the winter. And so it allows you to kind of heat or cool so that your equipment doesn't have to work so hard to finish getting it up to that temperature that you need. Similarly, we've got heat pump options that I'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide, but there's ducted and there's ductless. The ductless heat pumps you may have heard referred to as mini splits, and they're becoming more and more common. They've been around for, again, a long time. You know, the heat pump technology is something that we're very familiar with. So with any of these improvements over your older technology, we have a lot of benefits. So we know we're going to have cleaner air to breathe. We're going to have more consistent thermal comfort when we have equipment that's running better. And we're going to have more efficiency so we can cut our monthly costs. Other benefits, you know, if we're looking at reducing the amount of energy we're using, if we go with the heat pump, the ductless heat pump or the ducted, for example, you know, this is where I would say for a lot of folks, maybe geothermal is a little bit, you know, pricier, whereas these units are kind of a nice balance of the two. So they're more efficient than just kind of the regular forced air high efficiency unit, but not as expensive as a geothermal. And the way that these work, you can see the diagram here. This is an all electric system. So you're able to completely eliminate the combustion of natural gas inside your building through HVAC. So that also means you have a reduced risk of carbon monoxide and you have a reduced fire hazard because there's no open flame like there would be in an old style furnace. So you're also cutting your carbon emissions because we're no longer combusting anything. The way they work is you have an indoor unit. And one of the other really nice advantages to these is that you can have multiple zones. So each one of those indoor units is a zone. And so if there's an area of your building that's less frequently occupied, that can be on a zone that's maybe turned up in the summer to 78 or 80. And the areas where it's occupied, you have it cooler at a more comfortable level for the occupants. So there's a refrigerant, and that's how it utilizes to provide the cooling and the heating, has electric heating. And then there's an outdoor unit, which is pretty small footprint. It's similar to what you would see with an AC, you know, whole house AC system. So next up, we have Energy Star appliances. We've got a lot of options that are out there. If you're not familiar, Energy Star is a government certification program. So they've really made it easy by having this labeling system. They've gone through and analyzed all of the different important metrics about how much energy these appliances consume. And then you just look for that sticker. So if you're not really, you know, technical or not really sure what you're looking for, if you see Energy Star, you at least know that you're getting something that is more efficient than just the standard basic minimum of what's out there. So some of the examples here, if you're looking at updating your refrigerator, you're going to get, I mean, even if it's, you already have something that's older, you know that the new option is going to be better insulated. It's going to have better seals. I know personally, I used to be opposed to the indoor ice dispenser because they used to be notoriously leaky. You know, they would just, you would feel the cold air coming out of them constantly. Well, they've gotten a whole lot better at sealing those up now. So that's also an option. So you can actually enjoy some ice without opening the entire door. So the Energy Star refrigerators are about 9% more energy efficient than what is the standard option out there that's also brand new, but again, doesn't meet the same level of criteria that Energy Star does. And about $220 savings over the lifetime. Fridges aren't a huge energy suck, but you know, you figure you're going to have it for 10 years. So it's nice to go ahead and get that slightly more efficient Energy Star option. Other things, washing units, these have actually a lot of benefits. So they are 25% less energy when they're Energy Star certified compared to, again, the other brand new appliances that are out there that are not certified. 33% less water, which is amazing. They do a much better job as well of wringing out the clothing so that when it comes out, it doesn't have as much water in it that needs to be dried. And these Energy Star more efficient appliances clean better with less detergent. So you're kind of saving all the way around. So for those, it's about a $370 energy cost savings over the lifetime. And then on top of that, you have water and detergent cost savings. Dryers. So I think the statistic is something like 80% of Americans have a dryer in their home. But if you think about if all of the dryers that were sold in the US were Energy Star certified, we could be saving more than $1.5 billion annually in utility costs, and we could prevent the greenhouse gas emissions from 2 million vehicles. That's just from our dryers, from our little dryers. So it's kind of cool when you think about the cumulative impacts that we can have, and we can really make a huge difference when we just make that one-time decision. So with dryers, again, there are Energy Star options that are out there. A lot of them are kind of the conventional dryer that you're used to. In addition, if you want to get even more efficient, there are some newer technologies, well, I should say newer to us in the US. There's condensing dryers, and then there are heat pump dryers, and there are also condensing heat pump dryers. I have one of those, and it is awesome. I've had it for 2 years. And one of the fun features that I like to share when I do a sustainable tour here is that our dryer collects all of the water from the clothes into a little drawer, and then you can have it plumbed so it just goes down the drain, but I like it that way because I can actually pull that out and I use it to water my plants. So that's pretty cool that the water from washing my clothes is watering my plants. Another item would be dishwashers. So newer dishwasher models, you can again look for that Energy Star label. Newer ones are going to have soil sensors, so they don't just blast with the same amount of water and heat every single time. They actually detect, okay, do I need to have this be a little more intense wash, or can I get away with a light wash? They have better water filtration. They've got more efficient jets and better rack design so that they can, again, reduce the amount of energy and water consumption. And there are some models that I'm aware of that actually have a built-in, like a vertical bladder on one of the walls. And so when you do the rinse cycle, when it does the very, very last rinse where everything's pretty much clean, it's just, making sure that there's no soap left, it holds that water, and then the next time you do a load, it uses that to pre-rinse. So again, really creative solutions that are out there about how to be more efficient with our water. And then another option is induction cooking. This is one that I told Alex when we were talking on the phone yesterday, I could talk about this for the entire hour. So if you have questions on this, please be sure to write those down or send them in, because I am very, very familiar with these. Induction cooking is 100% the best way to cook. So you don't have any wasted energy heating the air around your pan. Normally that is all you're doing. Your burner is on and it's heating the air, and the pan just happens to go on top of it and capture some of that heat. With induction, it uses magnetism. And so it's able to more efficiently transfer that energy and turn it directly into heating the pan instead of heating the air around it. So that also means that it keeps your kitchen cooler, which is more comfortable for the cook. It's extremely fast, it's extremely efficient, and extremely safe. And yes, really, it's better than gas. All of the professional chefs that I've worked with that have had the opportunity to convert and work in induction kitchens absolutely love it for a whole variety of reasons. And I can tell you, I have been cooking on induction for at least 10 years. And I would never, ever go back to gas. So some of the other benefits, there are a lot of convenience benefits associated with this. You have much more precise and consistent cooking. So again, and compared to gas, where it's like, well, you kind of look at the flame and, eyeball it and you get familiar. With induction, it's precise. So you know exactly how hot it's going to be. You know exactly how long you need to cook for, and you get the same results every time. It prepares foods a lot faster. One of my party tricks is when people come over, I will literally put a pan of water on the stove and turn it on and show them just how quickly water boils, and it never ceases to amaze. It also has a lot easier cleanup, and this was one of the chefs that I work with talking about induction. He was the one that actually told me this, because from a commercial kitchen perspective, they're burning through all sorts of pots and pans and things, and so being able to clean the pans quickly increases their productivity so they can turn more product and make more money. So the easier cleanup is really interesting because you don't have that same issue with scorching the pan as easily as you would with gas. And you can see here from the picture, it literally is that amazing. So as long as you have a pan, doesn't have to be a special pan, doesn't have to be an expensive pan, as long as you have a pan that a magnet sticks to, as long as it's got some ferrous metal, it will work, and it will literally only heat the metal. So you can see this demonstration is awesome every time. You can just do the same with ice cubes. It will not melt that chocolate, you know, on the burner. It'll melt it in the pan. And so it's a great party trick. Safety benefits. There are a lot of very important safety benefits associated with induction cooking. You have no risk of burns or fires. You know, I've just like in this picture here, I've absolutely done that a whole bunch of times. You know, you take your pan of boiling water and you move it over to a burner that's not on. You can put your hand directly on that burner. It'll feel a little bit warm, but you will not burn. I mean, it is just, my hand is not made of metal, so it won't keep conducting. The other thing is, if you've ever had a pot of water boiling with some pasta and it starts to froth over, the responsiveness of this is so awesome. If you turn your back and you forget and you hear it boiling over, you go over, you turn that dial to off, and it just immediately, it's done. It's not a time lag. It immediately stops heating the pan. So for those reasons, it is a lot safer if you have pets that are, for some reason, up near your stove. If you have kids, if you have elderly, all of those risks of burns or fires are gone. It also features auto shutoff. So if you have a pan on a burner and then you pick it up to, let's say, go drain the pasta, after a few seconds, it will flash and notify you like, hey, there's nothing here anymore, and then it'll just automatically turn off. So you don't have to worry about forgetfulness and somebody leaving a burner on and something catching on fire. And because this is an all-electric way of cooking, you have no carbon monoxide fumes. So none of that is being breathed in. So if you have people with asthma in the household, you've again eliminated that risk. And then of course, because it is so efficient and it is all electric, you've reduced your CO2 emissions significantly. Lighting upgrades. This is a very, very popular one. At this point, I think everybody knows all about the fact that LEDs are the way to go. When I first started working in this field, I had to explain LED technology and convince people, and now it's just a no-brainer. So if you have 100% LED lighting in your facility, you're going to have a very significant, at least 50% cost savings. You also save time and labor changing bulbs, and you save money on the replacement costs of those bulbs. So you end up with about 50 to 70% less electricity needed when you switch to LED. And fun fact, for those of you that are maybe still have some of the old school incandescent bulbs, the reason why they warm up is because they're so inefficient. Only 10% of the energy that goes into an incandescent bulb turns into light, and 90% turns into waste heat. So again, a really great benefit when you have an area where you have air conditioning. You can not have to spend as much energy on that cooling load when you switch over to LED, because you're not generating all that excess waste heat either. And if we think about this globally, if we had the entire globe finally switch over and all of the older bulbs were gone and we had LED everywhere, we could save 1,400 million tons of CO2 from being generated, which also that energy efficiency means that we would avoid the construction of 1,250 power stations, which is just mind-blowing. But this is one of the reasons why a lot of people were skeptical when utilities started having these rebate programs to get you to go more efficient. Well, this is why. It costs a lot of money to build a power station. And so the more that we can just keep the need that we have with the existing equipment or new equipment that's being updated to more efficient or more renewable, the better off we are. Those power stations are not cheap. Next up, we have water heater upgrades. For a sense of scale, in a typical residential, water heaters are about 20% of the energy, the total energy. And it's depending on the size of your commercial office building, it may be pretty similar. There are different types of water heaters. So you have a natural gas option, solar options, or electric heat pump options. Most of us, well, there's also regular electric. Most of us are probably currently using a natural gas water heater. And so again, as we look at some of these other options that are out there, they're going to have increased efficiency. And again, part of that plan of electrification, we're eliminating the combustion in our facility. So that's a really important reason also to think about switching over. We use a lot of hot water. So the cost savings here is actually very significant, up to $3,500 over the unit's lifetime that we can save by going to a more efficient option. So here's an example of a heat pump water heater. You can see the diagram here showing you the way that heat pumps work in general, and also in this application, is that they pull ambient heat from the space around them. And they use that as a preheat, right? So if I'm in a room that's 80 degrees and I'm trying to get my water to 90 degrees, I don't have to work that hard. I can just pull some of that hot air, and then I just have to, make that gap to get it up to 90. So they're very, very efficient. These are also called hybrid electric. And that free heat means that you're not having to pay as much to heat it up from, if you think about the temperature that the water comes in from the city, it's usually quite chilly. So it may be, 50 degrees. So that free heat really saves you a lot of energy. It's about 4 times more efficient than a standard electric water heater. So again, I think a lot of times we've had experiences with electric appliances in the past, and we've kind of steered away from them. A lot of those issues are not issues anymore. Technology has vastly improved. So we've got about a 70% energy savings here. Again, because it's electric, we have no combustion, so it's safer. Again, we've reduced that risk of some sort of, fire issue. Also more reliable, and you're lowering your carbon footprint. One thing to note on these heat pump water heaters, because they are so efficient at pulling that ambient heat, it will cool the room that it's in. So ideally you want to have it someplace, they say 40 to 90 degrees. I have one of these installed in my home, and I have to say I actually keep the mechanical room door open because otherwise it gets so chilly in there because it's pulling so much heat from the ambient space, and it's in the basement, so it's not a warm space to begin with. So if I had to do over, I would put it in the warmest room of the house so that it would be even more efficient. And then another type is one you may be less familiar with. These are called evacuated tubes. So there are about 4 different types of solar water heaters, but evacuated tubes are the most efficient. And it's, again, a technology that's been around for a while. I've been familiar with it for 30 years. They keep, of course, getting, better and better. But basically, the evacuated tube works in some ways similar to a thermos. So these go externally mounted, and they absorb not the light rays from the sun like solar PV, but they absorb the heat from the sun. And so these tubes are designed so that they have a vacuum between the glass on the outside and the actual liquid that's running through the inside. So there's 2 tubes, and that vacuum makes it work like a thermos. It's a great insulator. So the tubes are typically round, so they're always perpendicular to the sun's rays. They're very energy efficient. They hold temperature a lot longer than one of the other types of solar water heaters, which is a flat plate collector. And these are typically designed with a closed loop system. So it's not just water running through, at least not in our climate zone. So obviously water freezes. So instead, there's a glycol solution, and that just keeps circulating and transferring that heat to the water system inside. So I've seen these done very successfully in a number of larger applications as well. So there are a number of hospitals, dormitories, et cetera, that really have enjoyed the benefits of these evacuated tube water heaters. So again, there's still some energy that's going to be consumed to finish getting up to that final temperature, but you're using this free energy from the sun to preheat that water up to a certain level. Another example of project that might be beneficial for you is one that is not quite as sexy as solar PV or evacuated tubes, but sealing ducts. Ducts can vibrate and get loose and then create air gaps where they're leaking out. So the problems associated with that, you have, if you're trying to push a certain volume of air and it keeps leaking out along the way, that means that your motor is going to have to keep working harder and harder to get you that air. So by just simply duct tape, by sealing around, you can reduce the load on those fans, which also means you'll extend the life of that fan. The conditioned air will get where it needs to be with less energy loss. So you'll obviously have some energy cost savings, and you probably will also have more comfortable spaces. I can tell you another quick example. I purchased an older home in Indianapolis in a neighborhood called Fountain Square, and we were having issues with one room being just really cold in the winter and really hot in the summer. And so I went down, there's not a full basement, there's a dugout space, and then there's a crawl space. And back in the crawl space, they had the flex ducts running over to what was probably an addition at some point. And it was quite a shock, but then no surprise that we were having comfort issues because the flex duct was completely separated by about 2 feet. And so the air was trying to somehow magically jump that gap to continue flowing to the room. And there was even a little rubber ball stuffed inside the duct. So some kids were apparently playing in our crawl space. And once we reconnected and sealed that up real well, it made the space a whole lot more comfortable, and we were not wasting energy, heating the crawl space. Other weatherization tips. You can put weather stripping around windows and doors. You can also seal joints. Again, I've had experience with older buildings where we had done a blower door test, and they were able to look at the volume of air that was escaping from various, cracks and seals. And so we went through this process of doing the weather stripping. I bought a case of caulk and went around every single frame of every window, every door, every joint where the baseboard hit the floors, and sealed it all up. And when they came back and did a post blower door test, we had a 30% reduction in air infiltration. So it made an old home actually not drafty and really comfortable and cut the energy costs significantly. So this is, again, something that's really pretty easy to do, and it can have a really significant impact. Another thing is insulation. Again, this is not always easy to install in some locations, but you can look at if it's possible to add insulation to existing walls, attics. Also, if there's a basement, the rim joist is an area where often it doesn't get insulated. That's where the concrete foundation meets the wood flooring. So those are all areas where you can add insulation. Also keep in mind, if you have cellulose insulation in the walls, over time that will settle. And then you'll have essentially the top, foot or two of your walls have no insulation. And of course, when you're heating a space, heat rises. So then you're really, increasing the energy loss and the cost to heat your space. So they can come back in and add, they poke little holes and can blow in insulation. And again, we've had that done and have been very happy with the results. So that'll help increase the R value and make your house or your building more insulated so that it reduces those costs to heat and cool. Another one is windows. So if you've got older windows, single pane windows, you probably are very well aware that they are leaky. They let that conditioned air escape. If you have somebody working right next to one of those windows, they also will typically have a lot of complaints because they'll feel all of that coldness coming in the winter. They just don't have the same insulative value. So the drafting windows really increase our costs. So if we upgrade, we can get Energy Star windows, which have a whole range of details that make them better, but they allow you to have more comfortable space and happier occupants, which means more productive occupants. On average, the cost savings is about $270 per window per year, which is good because windows are not cheap. But if you're going to do it, you absolutely should go with an Energy Star model so that you have higher efficiency. And when you do that, that is a very important part of the facade of your building. So that'll reduce your carbon emissions, reduce your reliance on the utility, and increase that thermal comfort. All right. So with that, we've covered a whole lot of information. I hope that you've seen some things that have piqued your curiosity. Happy to answer questions and talk more. And then I know Alex has a little bit of wrap up to talk about the program itself. But for now, we've got 15 minutes left. So if anybody has questions that you would like to ask or comments, we are ready to take those.
I have a question. Just
Yeah,
to get us started here. What are your thoughts on smart thermostats as a means for energy savings for a building?
Oh, that's a great question.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about smart thermostats too, for folks that aren't as familiar with smart thermostats.
Yeah. So I would say most of you have probably heard of like Nest. They did a really great job of marketing. They're not the first and they're not the last. Smart thermostats have been around for a while, but the Nest was the first one to really pitch it to smaller companies and residential scale. Larger companies have been doing it forever. So what it means is it's programmable and you're able to have, temperatures that fluctuate on a regular pattern based off of occupancy. It also means that in some cases they are learning, that they observe. They have essentially occupancy sensors built in and they observe when they see activity and they start to come up with patterns. So it actually, some of them have some AI capability and they say, oh, it looks like maybe you had it set up so that the temperature increases when everyone goes home at 6 o'clock, but in reality I see that somebody's here constantly until 7. So maybe I'm going to adjust that a little bit and see if you prefer that setting. So they can modify based off of those patterns of behaviors. But again, you can program it, and if they you forget, let's say, oh, we're closed for a week for holiday break, it would observe, boy, I haven't seen anybody in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and adjust the temperature down to the unoccupied setting and save them some energy. So yes, big fan of those. They're, again, relatively easy to install and can have a great impact.
And on a similar note, what are your thoughts on like smart power strips or for like the vampire energy that you might see like in a lot of like office spaces and for folks that aren't familiar, maybe you can chat a little bit more about like what those are, a power strip versus a smart power strip.
Yeah, so a smart power strip, well, there's a few things that are worth mentioning. So a typical smart power strip is going to have essentially a driver, so something that you plug in. It's kind of like an if-then situation. If my computer is on and it's plugged into this particular plug, then I want to have this other auxiliary related equipment on. So my printer will be on, my second monitor will be on, my speaker will be on, what have you. If that main driver, that computer is turned off, then it will automatically turn off all those auxiliary devices. So you don't have to manually go through a process of turning those things off. So you have noticeable energy savings because of that. There's another technology that's newer, which I am very excited about, which is smart plugs. And I see in office settings, and I'm sure you do too, all kinds of little individual appliances like space heaters. Space heaters are notoriously energy hogs, and they often get left on. And so smart plugs are a perfect solution for something like that, because you can, there's a couple different options. One is you can literally buy an adapter that you plug into your existing outlet, or you can replace certain key outlets with a smart plug outlet. Either way, they are able to be individually addressed. You can utilize an app so that you can program them. So I can literally have one outlet and it will automatically be programmed so that at 5 o'clock it turns off. So I don't care if somebody forgot and left their heater on, it is turned off, and I can do that either with programming, or I can also access it remotely and do that if I forget that I turned something on and didn't turn it off. Great questions. What else?
Thank you.
Yeah, is there this is Orlando Mendez with Transformation Ministries, and is there a resource where we can find just a variety of these things that you talked about? Like the water heater was something that really hit home. The other was the stove top, stuff like that. Is there a place that you shop for these, or is there a list that maybe the program has?
Yeah, I will always say for those kinds of things, a good place to start would be the Energy Star website. They have a number of resources. They have both information that helps you to learn more about how the technology works, so you can understand it if that's something that's important to you. But they also have links for how to locate them in your area, as well as how to find if there are any eligible rebates or incentives for that kind of equipment in your area. So Energy Star is a great place to start for those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have another question, kind of similar to Orlando's question.
Sure.
Related to like resources and like where do we look for these types of projects and or types of different appliances or products. Do you have like any recommendations when it comes to what you look for in a contractor and like trying to talk with them about different energy efficiency projects that you have in mind? Any like pointers or tips based on your experience?
Yeah, so I will say that can be a challenge. I've experienced that where I was trying to get a furnace replaced, and somebody recommended an installer, and when I started talking with them and I explained, this was many years ago, and we were looking at just doing a high efficiency forced air furnace, just kind of replacing an older one with a newer, more efficient one. And I encountered basically a lack of education. And he kind of said, oh, we don't like doing those, blah, blah, blah. And so I quickly realized, well, he was not the contractor for me. So you will run into some contractors that they do what they do, they know what they know, and they have no interest in learning and growing. So do make sure that you have some base knowledge about the technology so that you can ask them and see if they have experience, if they have interest, if they have understanding. And some contractors will be great. I've got an example where I was looking at doing a hardy panel cementitious fiberboard siding. And there's a contractor that had a great reputation, great quality, but he'd never done this before. And he took it upon himself to actually contact a manufacturer, see what kind of training they had for him so that he could get up to speed. And, really, for him, it turned out to be a wonderful business opportunity because he became the first certified installer in Indianapolis. And now, he's the guy that you go to. So if they're open and they look at it that way, and you can, talk with them about that, for them, it can be a business opportunity, a growth potential. They've never done a ductless mini split before. Okay, well, talk to the manufacturer, get your training, and then become the guy, the one that does that, and that everybody knows that you have it down and you know what you're doing.
I have a question about, so that obviously every building is going to have its own unique scenario of sort of where the highest demand is and therefore like what the most important intervention is. But is there kind of a, for the best bang for your buck, like if you're going to give a most general, like everybody, if you can, should do this, it's like kind of that mix between like more affordable and does a lot for your building, if there's any kind of like hierarchy that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I would say to preface is think about lifespan. So there are some items that are just going to be more expensive, right? Like replacing windows is not cheap, but your windows are going to be there for, 50 years, hopefully. So it's harder sometimes for people to say, oh, I don't know, it's so much more to go just one tier higher in efficiency, but you can't think about it in a, day-to-day kind of scenario. You need to think about long-term. Am I gonna have this building in 5 years? Am I gonna have this building in 10 years? Is it also going to increase the value if you think about real estate? If I've got a building with single pane windows and there's an identical one with triple pane windows and I'm looking at purchasing, I'm going to buy the one that's got the better windows. So that kind of is an important thing for everybody, I would say, to think about. Same thing goes with HVAC. You only get one opportunity typically to make that kind of big long-term investment. So if your furnace goes out, please do not just get the first thing that you can get, the cheapest thing you can get, because you're stuck with it for the next 30 years. And when that kind of stuff, hopefully you can plan ahead and not wait for an emergency. But if you can do that, then you're setting yourself up for lower energy costs for the long run. And so, that's two great examples where I'd say you need to figure out a way to get that bigger investment in. As far as bang for your buck, short term, lighting is a no-brainer. Absolutely. Lighting is a no-brainer. If you haven't already switched out all your parking lot lights, your walkway lights, your interior lights, your wall packs, even your emergency exit lights to LED, the time is now. Those are absolutely a really, really quick payback. And it makes your whole space look newer, refreshed. It makes it look more modern and appealing for both customers and for employees. So it's a very visual thing as well. So I think lighting is probably that. Don't even think about it, just do it. All right, any other questions from the audience? Well, if anybody thinks of anything else, you can certainly reach out to myself or to Alex. And Alex, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes as well. I know we have a stop at 11, but if there's any additional questions, maybe Kelly, if you're able to, we could answer those. But I do want to give some announcements, and also if you can give us some feedback on the webinar so far, I would appreciate it. I'll put that in the chat here. Just give us a rating of this session on the webinar. Let us know what you think. I will send a recording of the webinar via email, probably later today or later this week. And just to give sort of like a high level of the EASSI program in terms of like additional webinars and social opportunities. So today we talked about EASSI projects, some of those EASSI projects that are listed under the website that we've given examples of. That isn't an exhaustive list, but just gives you a sense of some of the energy efficiency projects that are out there. As Donna provides that energy assessment report, she'll also lay out some additional ideas for energy savings. Looking forward, our next webinar is August 2nd. And so for that webinar, what we're considering is how do you, as a potential topic is how do you raise capital to fund these projects? We could also look into utility rebates. How can we layer those utility rebates and incentives? Many of them that have been discussed in this webinar that qualify for incentives and rebates through Indiana Michigan Power and or NIPSCO. And again, we're also open to different topics if adding additional webinars to the EASSI program. So please feel free to reach out, share your thoughts on that, and we'd be happy to add new webinar opportunities to speak on those particular topics that you have in mind. In addition to that, our next after our webinar on August 2nd, we do have a social event that we have scheduled for August 11th, and I'll provide more details as we get near to that date. That's all I have in terms of EASSI updates, but if there are any questions related to EASSI, whether that's your on-site energy assessment, maybe you might have received a memo, just let us know, and happy to answer those questions. I think we're approaching 11, so I'll stick around for 5, 10, 15 minutes to answer any additional questions on EASSI and or talk about anything related to energy efficiency. So thank you again for attending.
Thanks for organizing, Alex.
All right, any questions, Mitch? I think you're on mute if you're trying to ask a question. All right, well, in the meantime, while Mitch is working on the microphone, I do have another question for you, Kelly, if you're able to stick around for a few minutes.
Sure.
So just thinking long term for building, like let's say like folks are interested in electrifying their building, like what are the first steps you would recommend for folks to take as part of like making that progressive step to a fully electrified building?
Yeah. Well, so first, just a quick definition. So when you hear people talking about electrification, what this means is globally, we have an understanding that we have to divest ourselves from fossil fuels in order to reach the goals that we have for slowing and stopping the climate change impacts that are already affecting us. So with that, what it means is where we have on-site combustion of different types of fossil fuels, we need to find alternatives. And so that means instead of, like we said earlier, the natural gas, type of powered furnace, we need to find a way to switch to an electric option for heating and cooling. So, it's just a lot of the big items that we have that are need to be addressed for electrification are, of course, our vehicles, our heating sources for both water and air, and our heating sources for food. So really, it's not a ton that's out there, but anywhere that we're looking at that, other options would be like if we have a space that's bigger that has fork trucks. So getting off of those propane fork trucks and switching over to electric. The ones where the options are already out there, that's an easy place to start. There are going to be some particular pieces of equipment that are very heavy duty that are going to be harder to electrify. It's going to take more technology improvements and more work. But a lot of the other stuff, like I said, the technology is there. You know, it's easy to go ahead and switch over our heating sources for, you know, our HVAC, our water heaters, and our cooktops. So just plan for it and don't wait for a disaster and an emergency replacement where supply chain could be an issue. So definitely plan ahead, because some of those items do take a little longer to get.
All right, thank you. I think Mitch might have left the meeting, but I did see a message from him that he did drop a question in the chat because he was unable to unmute his mic. That question is there a way, as we look deeply into companies, who is really sustainable and who is greenwashing, as in looking at suppliers, et cetera?
So you can always look for third-party certifications. Those are a great way to know. They're not just saying, hey, we're doing a bunch of stuff. Other than that, I would also just let you know that there is a federal program. The FTC actually has a program called Green Guides, and they regulate. So the issue of greenwashing isn't really as big of an issue these days, because if they say something that is just blatantly false, they will get fined by the FTC. So there's also a lot of accountability. You know, the large corporations are all have sustainability programs, and they are all working very hard because they see that it's also a market-driven thing. So they will also hold each other accountable. You know, they won't let their competitors get away with saying that they're doing stuff that's, you know, not true. So I wouldn't worry so much about it, but that third-party certification is always a great way to just have a little extra peace of mind.
All right, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, Carol, any questions on the webinar or easy questions?
I just asked one question in the chat, and that is it okay to share the recording with our staff?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, that's what we want.
I assume so, but I just thought I'd clarify. So, thank you very much.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right, well, I'll end this recording, and thank you again for attending the webinar.